Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are going to paint a horse silhouette against a wildfire background. Now, this painting was inspired by one of my favorite songs in the world, Wildfire, as well as by a conversation with a good friend, Sandy Gentile. Make sure you stick around for the very end of the video where I'm going to show you super quick how you can also finger paint this background as well as announce a giveaway. And before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and then check out the video description below where you can find a link to download this image of the horse as well as a full list of materials needed for this painting. Now let's get started. Today I'm starting with a black canvas and I've just painted this with Mars black paint. You can use black gesso or even buy a black canvas, whatever you prefer. And I'm going to be using this palette knife. This is the one that I get the result that I like the best with, but if you don't have this knife, you can either take an old credit card and cut it to size, or you can use any palette knife that you're the most comfortable with. Now, the first thing we want to do is take our template, and there's a link in the video description below to where you can download this template. Hold it up to where you want it on your canvas. So I don't want the foot of the horse all the way to the bottom because I'm going to add just a very little bit of a ground there. But what I'm looking at is how high up the image goes. I want to make sure that my fire at least goes above that so that the horse doesn't get lost in this black background when we paint it in with black. But I know that my horse is going to fit fine because on this side where I want it, I'm going to take the fire all the way to the top. As we come across, it will come down a little bit, but I want nice, tall, bright flames on this side where the horse is going to go. Now I'm using Cadmium Red Deep hue to start. And I'm going to come in with the long edge of my palette knife and scoop up a bit. See, I've actually got quite a bit of paint there. Now I don't want to start this color clear down here at the bottom because once I start putting the yellow on, it may mix too much and then I'll get a weird color that I don't like to work with. So I'm going to start right about in the center, and I kind of want my flames to swoop up in this general direction. Not everything has to move like that, otherwise I'm just going to get kind of a swooped wall and I don't want that. So I'm going to turn my palette knife upside down, put it about where I want that red to start, and notice I didn't push it flat. It's just the edge of the knife that's against the canvas. So I'm going to touch it to the canvas, roll it just a little bit more toward it, and kind of swoop gently up this way, turning a little as I go to let that paint kind of break and fizzle out. Let's do that again. So roll it toward the canvas, light pressure, kind of turning as we go, and giving kind of an organic movement to it. When you get those lines like that, just super light pressure, just go over that line to smooth it out. As I come across, I'm going to make my line lower and lower. Don't put too much pressure on your knife, particularly up at the top, because you don't want your fire to fizzle out completely. You want those little breaks there. Start a little lower. Smooth out that line. Let's get some of that fire up a little bit higher. So I didn't pick up quite as much there. I'm just going to come in here. I'm just touching the paint to the canvas. My knife is not touching the canvas, just the paint. Get some nice heavy flame right there that goes off the edge of the canvas. I think that those little breaks are going to look a lot more natural than if you scrape it and let it be fuzzy. So there we've got some nice tall flames that go off the edge. Start a little lower again. Turn the knife as we go. Smooth out our line. Just touching the paint, let's add some little breaks. And I'm going to continue just like that all the way. My red will probably end right about here on this side. Had a little dried blob in there. I just scraped it off, wipe it off, smooth that out. Try and make sure that you're not getting patterns in there. You know, just because we're moving down lower on this side doesn't mean the top edge of your flame has to be like that. You just generally want it to move down like that. So I've got some shorter ones here, kind of a little tall burst there. And actually, I think I'm gonna add just a tiny speck. Just right in there. I'm just touching the corner of my knife. So palette knife, like anything else, is really about pressure. How much pressure are you putting on the knife? So right here where the paint looks really thick and kind of buttery, and I'm getting those breaks, there's almost no pressure. It's just the paint on here touching either the canvas or the wet paint that I've applied. Where it looks a little bit more fuzzed out, that's heavier pressure being applied. See, when I really scrape it, that's what happens. So if you want a thick, buttery look like that, just touch the paint. Don't let the palette knife dig. If you want a fuzzed out look like that, let the palette knife scrape. Now, if your finger happened to touch any of the paint, and surprisingly mine didn't, and you get a little gouge, let's say like that, end up with a little gouge. Practice that pressure. Just touch the paint to the paint and scoot right over it, and now it's gone. Let's go into our Naphthol, and I'm not gonna clean off my palette knife. I'm just gonna go straight into it. Now, if you don't have Naphthol, you can use Cadmium Red medium hue. I think they're pretty close to the same color, but I feel like the Naphthol is a little bit brighter, a little more intense, and I like that. So I'm gonna start this color lower, right about in here, about an inch, inch and a half below the red. But I'm gonna do the same thing. And as we come up into the red, you'll start to see a little bit of a blend between the two colors. And I know on the camera, it's really hard actually to see this color. In person, when you're painting it, you won't have the difficulty of seeing the difference between those colors like you are on the camera. So the same type of thing, super light pressure so I'm not gouging into that red. Let's switch over to this camera. I think you might be able to see the color difference a little bit better in this camera for some reason. So my Naphthol, just barely letting the two paints touch together. And there, hopefully you can see the difference in those two colors and the way they're streaking together a bit. And that's how we're starting to get the look of fire. Still starting below that cadmium red. Oh, my finger touched a little. Just kind of scooting it lightly over. I'm not going up quite as high as I took the red, but I for sure want to get it up into there in little hints. So a little bit of this Naphthol will come almost all the way up to the top. Just kind of giving it a natural wiggle as I go. I'm almost kind of wiggling it back and forth like that. Not that much, just the tiniest hint as I go, and I'm kind of twisting it a little. It's just these teeny tiny movements that are really giving us that look of flames that are kind of bursting and shooting. Let's just take that all the way across. When I was getting ready to do this painting, I was going back and forth on whether or not I wanted to do it with a palette knife or whether I wanted to finger paint it. I couldn't decide. So I asked my Patreon members what they preferred, and most of them said palette knife. There were a few who said finger painting. So that's why we're going with palette knife. However, for you guys who wanted finger painting, stick around to the end of the video and I'm gonna do a super quick demonstration on how to do this finger painting. It's not gonna be as in-depth, so it's not gonna be like a whole another full-length video nested inside of this one. It's just gonna be a super quick demonstration. And then after that, at the end of the video, I'm gonna have a little bit of a giveaway, so make sure you stick around for that so you can get the details on the giveaway. Make sure you get that color all the way to the edge. If your color stops before the edge of the canvas, it's gonna look like your fire is kind of squished into view. We wanna make it look like this fire goes on. It doesn't start right here. It doesn't end right here. It exists on both sides of the canvas. So just don't be afraid to get right to that edge. And if you want to extend it all the way around the edge, that's perfectly fine. That's too much work for me, so I don't do that. Okay, so now some of these darker red areas up here, let's add some little accents of this naphthol. So I just pulled a little ball of it on the edge of my knife. And what I'm gonna do is come in here. Again, I'm just barely touching the paint to the paint. See that tiny, tiny speck of the naphthol there? So that's what I'm going for. I'm just gonna touch that and just ever so lightly scoot it over top of that red. I wiped off my knife. I feel like I have just a little bit too hard of a line there, so I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna start in the red and just very, very lightly scoot it over top of that naphthol. And now I've got a nice little bright spot in there, but it's not a glob that's just hanging out there. So I'm just gonna add a few little specks of that here and there. See, just a tiny bit of paint. And then we'll move on to our next color. Now remember, when you're painting fire, the hottest part of the fire is at the bottom. And the hottest colors are the brightest colors. So red is actually gonna be the coolest color, and white is gonna be the hottest color. So we wanna make sure that the concentration of our brighter colors is toward the bottom. The concentration of our darker colors is toward the top. But we do want a little bit of accent here and there. Otherwise, it's gonna feel very striped. Let's say you mess up though, because it happens. Let's say that somehow you get a blob like that. It's actually very easy to correct. Just wipe your knife off so that there's no paint on it. Come in and scrape it away from your image. Don't scrape it toward your image. Scrape it away just to make sure that you don't have any blobs of the paint. Once that dries, just put a little bit of black over it and it's gonna be perfectly fine. And that can go for anything in here. If there's something you don't like, you can always come back with some black paint afterwards and touch it up and just take any of those out. All right, let's move on to our orange. So hopefully you'll be able to see the orange a little bit better here. And this is actually cadmium red, light hue. And I know it's quite orange. You could use cadmium orange if you like. I like the cad red light because it's a little bit deeper than cadmium orange, so I prefer this one, but it doesn't really matter. We're gonna do the same thing again. We're gonna start about an inch, inch and a half below the naphthol. Kind of swoop it up and turn it, super light pressure, wiggling it through that naphthol mixture. Break up any of those hard lines. And hopefully now it's starting to look like hot fire to you. But again, on this camera, I think you can see the color difference a little bit better. So I'll do a few of these up close like that so that you can see how the colors streak together. So just kind of wobbling my knife through there, streaking it up until I'm not really seeing any of that orange anymore. Smooth out that little line. Light pressure. And if your knife starts to get too messy, you're not getting enough separation of those colors, just wipe it off whenever you feel like you need to. See, now I have much more definition between the colors there because I wiped off my knife. I'm going to keep that wiped off, I think. I really like the difference in those colors there. I'm coming about all the way down to the edge of the canvas here. In fact, by the time I get to the far left, I will be starting the orange all the way at the bottom. Again, let's add a few little bright points of orange in some of these little bits of flame at the top. So I just have a tiny bit of orange. I'm going to start in this bright area here, just touching the paint to the paint and lightly scoot it. And there we have a little bright spot. We'll just do a couple more of those, very faintly. Up in this upper area anyway. We'll probably do some more that are a little more intense lower. All right, I have a relatively clean palette knife and a clean paper towel. Let's start on our yellow. So I'm going to start all the way at the bottom. Same technique, bring it up, and it's really bursting into that orange. And they're super separate there on the edges, and that's exactly the way I want to keep it. So I might just smooth out this edge just a little bit. But before I go back for more yellow, I'm going to wipe that off on my paper towel. I have a clean palette knife here, and I'm just going to smooth out this line a bit. I didn't pick up more yellow, but I definitely don't have that orange on there anymore. Maybe I'll streak just a little of that orange I just picked up right in there, because we don't want a solid yellow wall there at the bottom. I'm going to do that all the way across. Now again, just like my colors got lower over here, my yellow is too. So I'm not going to have the super heavy yellow that I have here, right here. This is going to be my brightest and hottest area. So as I move this way, my yellow flames are going to get a little bit shorter and not quite as concentrated at the bottom. And I'll show you how I do that when I get over to that area. Now I'm starting to get over to this lower area, so I didn't pick up quite as much yellow. I'm going to do the same thing though. Just kind of wobbling that knife just a bit as I go. And I didn't clean off my knife that time before going back to smooth it out. Now I'm not going to clean off my knife at all, and I'm going to pick up a little less yellow than before, still starting at the bottom. And these flames aren't going to come up as high as the ones on this side. When I come back and add some accent yellow, it'll probably be up a little bit higher. But I like to start a little bit lower because you can always add more. All right, let's add, clean that off. Let's add a few little accent points, just like before. Tiny sliver of yellow, wherever you feel like you need it. Remember, you're only touching paint to paint. Just scoot it over top. Mostly where I already have some of the orange. I'm not really going to put this straight onto the cadmium red. I love the way that when you do this with almost no pressure, the way that wet paint on the canvas grabs the wet paint on the palette knife and just holds it right there. It doesn't blend it, it just grabs it and holds it. And I really, really love that effect. But if you have a hard time with that, with the pressure aspect of a palette knife, you know, it's just practice like anything else. Just grab a junk canvas and practice that. Maybe grab a tube of paint that you never use because you don't like the color and use the entire tube practicing palette knife. We've all got a tube of paint that we never use because we just don't like the color. Let's clean that off. Now for this next part, you are 100% gonna wanna wipe off your palette knife after every single time you touch the canvas. Because if you don't, you're gonna start grabbing these orange and red colors, mixing them with the yellow and the white, and you're gonna get what I referred to as fry sauce color. Now I realize if you don't live in Utah, you have no idea what fry sauce is, but let's just say it's a really gross color and you don't want that in your fire. So I grabbed a little bit of yellow. We're gonna really create some hot, hot spots in our fire. I'm gonna come into my white and pull a little bit of it out, and they're not mixed on my palette knife, they're still separate. Come into an area that you want to keep really bright, and again, we're just touching paint to paint. Just barely, barely scoot it over top of that yellow. Wipe it off. Not that much paint. So even if you have a line that you want to smooth out, wipe off your knife before you go back to do it. Because even the tiniest bit of that red-orange going back into your yellow-white is going to look really gross. If you're scooting over it with just the slightest amount of pressure, you shouldn't have too hard of a time with them blending. Just a little extra yellow right here to kind of bridge the gap between those two white sections. Tiny speck of white. You just want to avoid creating stripes in your fire. 1.5 inch wide knife edge here, so you don't want a stripe, a stripe, a stripe every 1.5 inches. You just want to make sure that you break those up wherever you can. Drag some of it that way. Not terribly worried about this part because it's all going to be covered by the ground anyway. Let's just do a little bit more. I'm not gonna take this bright hot color all the way to the other edge. I might add a few little hints of it in here, but this is my bright spot. So it's gonna have the concentration of the white yellow. So I mentioned fry sauce. Fry sauce is basically ketchup and mayo mixed together. So if you imagine what ketchup and mayo mixed together looks like, that's pretty much the color that we're looking to avoid here. That white is too bright, so I just grabbed a little more yellow. Same with that one. Now I got a little white streak in my red, and I don't want that there. So I'm just gonna lightly touch it and scrape it off. Don't try and swipe over it and over it and over it to blend it in or streak it away. Just scrape it off. But again, don't go all the way down to the canvas, because then you'll have a big valley in there that you gotta try and cover. So I just took a slightly damp brush and a little bit of black paint, and we'll just paint over that. Super easy. Anything else we decide we don't like, just take a little bit of black paint in there and get rid of it. Not a big deal. So I decided I want to bring some of this up a little bit higher, so I'm going back to my Naphthol because I have plenty of the red on there. I'm just gonna come in through here, light pressure, and my canvas is starting to dry. So it's really, blooper. Anyway, so it's really not blending with those colors, it's just skirting over the top of it. So if your paint is dry, you can still go over it. You don't have to scrap it if you decide you want to add some more just because it's already dry. Just keep going. I just felt like it was way too red in here. Too much of the cadmium red. A little more of the orange. Wiped off my knife. More of the yellow. Let's bring this yellow up quite high on this side. Little hint of that yellow white. All right, now you're gonna wanna wait until this paint is dry enough that when you touch it, it doesn't squish and move around. And that might take a while. Mine is pretty thick, so it's gonna take a little bit of time. So in the meantime, I'm gonna get my tracing image ready. Now I just printed it in red because my black ink is almost gone. So I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna take a piece of black charcoal and just scribble around the outline. I don't have to fill in everything. I'm not gonna make you watch me do all of this. So see, all I did was scribble around wherever the lines are gonna be that I'm gonna want to trace. All right, now I'm just gonna kinda hope that this is dry enough. Don't do like I do. Actually, wait until your paint's dry. So I'm gonna take my image, line it up. I'm gonna make this foot that's on the ground be about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch above the ground. Make sure that your image is level. And I'm gonna take some painter's tape and just secure it down. I know that this paint right here is quite dry, so I'm not worried about that. Don't gouge it down onto your canvas, just lightly smooth it. There. Now I'm just gonna take a ballpoint pen, and it doesn't even have to be a working pen, just enough so that you can kind of scratch around that outline. I'm not gonna be too careful around the hair because I'm probably gonna do my own thing here anyway. This is gonna transfer that charcoal down onto the canvas. So you don't have to push real hard. I'm kind of scribbling back and forth around the line. I'm gonna throw you into time lapse and do the rest of this. It's probably gonna take me a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes. And then we're just gonna gently peel the tape off. Now keep your stencil nearby just in case some of your images didn't transfer very well, then you can refer back to it. Now I'm gonna take my 1/4 inch angle brush, but use whatever you're most comfortable with to fill this in. And I've got some black paint. I'm just gonna start going around the edges, filling it all in. I'm not gonna worry about the hair just yet. So I'm gonna put you into time lapse while I do this part, and we'll come back and do the hair. If there's something you don't like about the image that you traced, if you did a line wrong or you just don't like the way the image looks, then you can absolutely make any changes. You don't have to paint it on the exact same way. It's not a coloring book where you're supposed to stay inside the lines. These are your lines, so you can make them however you want. So it can be a little challenging if your canvas is quite textured. So I got outside of my line there a little bit, gave him a bumpy butt. So I just cleaned off my brush, dried it on a paper towel, and then I can smooth that right back out. So just don't freak out if you get outside of your line or your shape that you want, because you can easily fix it. All right, now I can see where the hair was generally in my transfer, and I'm not gonna paint it in just like that because I didn't really like that. So I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna load up with my black and always make sure that angle is dragging. Come in here about to where the hair started, and I'm just gonna kind of flick some pieces out in different directions. Just give him hair that looks like what I want to see. Take it all the way down to his back. I'm not doing good today, man. Dropping palette knives, dropping paintbrushes. And same thing with the tail. I am going to follow that line here and bring it around and just kind of flick it. Same on the bottom, I'll follow that bottom line around and flick it. And let's add a little bit of a ground. So I have my 1/2" angle brush that I wet in my jar. I'm gonna get some black, and I'm not gonna put a lot of attention or detail into this ground. I think I may make it a little higher up on the sides, just kind of carving out some kind of a shape. Nothing too specific. Bring it up here to meet the foot. I did cover the bottom of the foot a little bit. And then maybe up a little higher on this far side again. And then just fill all of that in. Now I'm going to take my fan brush and I wet it in my jar. You can skip this part altogether if you like. I'm just going to wet it in some black. I'm just going to kind of use the corner of the brush, not the full length of it, and just flick some grasses, and they don't have to even go everywhere, just kind of here and there. Whenever it's starting to look fuzzier than grass-like, just get maybe just a tiny bit more water and load up with some more paint. A little more water, a little more paint. Just the corner. Make sure they're all going in different directions. Just look a little bit more natural that way. And then I'm going to sign it with a mixture of yellow and white. All right, let's finger paint some fire. So I'm going to go into it with 2 fingers. Grab my colors. I'm going to start about like I did on the other one, so about at the middle, and kind of smear up, letting my fingers kind of move from side to side. And as I get up toward the top, I like to kind of almost tap like that, but as I'm still moving, so I get a little bit of a break in there. I know that just looks messy and chaotic and kind of gross right now, but it will look much better. And there is your palette knife wildfire painting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do with this painting. If you mix up the colors, whether you choose to do it palette knife, finger painting, or whatever. So now I'm gonna finish my finger painted version of this painting, and then we're gonna do a giveaway. So all you have to do to enter to win this painting is to follow me on either Facebook or Instagram. There's links to both in the video description below. And then whichever version you choose to paint, make sure you either share it on my Facebook page or tag me in it on Instagram. Next week, I will pick one random winner and I will announce that winner in my video next week. Again, make sure that you subscribe, and if you've already subscribed, make sure you hit that bell so that you can get a notification every time I upload a new video. Also, make sure you head on over to my website at paintingwithjane.com, where you can get a set of my brushes, sign up for my mailing list, and so much more. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.